marriage and building on our relationships. And it doesn't matter where we're at. I like to think of marriage. What the Lord has kind of shown me is more of it's like a construction zone, and there's always a construction zone outside, and what that means is there's always improvements being made, and it's under construction. And the purpose for construction is to always improve, make it more beautiful, renovate, and so that's what it takes with relationships. And sometimes, there are times where relationships actually do come to an end. I mean, there's some examples in the Bible where, Paul and Barnabas separated, and, Jesus did give an example that God doesn't like it, but divorce will happen. I mean, it can happen. And so, but it takes a lot of hard work. And after we've done everything that we possibly can, then, we're still not done. We can ask for help. And that's what part of this little thing over here is going to be about. It's about, when it comes to the point that you can't figure it out, then you need to ask for help. So, and really, that's what in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul actually says that every problem that people have really needs to be settled within the body of believers. Now, that is something that doesn't happen, and I don't like nobody knowing my business either, but originally we were to be open and honest, and if we have problems, we try to resolve that amongst each other. But what does it take, when it comes to building relationships, and what does it take for real success in a relationship? The very first two things we kind of talked about before, but sacrifice. Most young people going into a relationship, at first they're willing to give everything up, whatever it takes. You be my girlfriend or you be my boyfriend. But that quickly wears off because a sacrifice without being selfless, in other words, selfless is I don't want anything in return, type of a deal. And it takes discipline. That's where we get our word disciple from. It's following Jesus is a discipline. Every day we get up and we read the word. Every day we pray, and every day we worship. Every day we sacrifice unto the Lord, and so there's some disciplines that are involved in order to. The Bible calls it. Paul says, "Exercise thyself rather unto godliness." In other words, we have to literally train for godliness, and that takes the sacrifice to one another, sacrifice to God, but sacrifice to one another, selfless, and in having these disciplines. And these disciplines comes through structure and through rules. There has to be some boundaries, and of course it takes a lot of planning. It takes a commitment, team building, but then also all work and no play. What?
Thanks, Jack.
That's right. And so, just like the cake and the recipe, we got to remember every once in a while, we've got to have fun. We have to have some fun. We've got to enjoy life, and we have to, one of the things that I have learned over the years, especially with pastors, is that after a while, pastors stop having fun, and it's dull, and families stop having fun. They don't plan. When you're growing up, everybody would take a family vacation, but nowadays schools, even a lot of schools around the nation, they don't have a summer break anymore. And they make the kid go to school year round, and they get a 2-week break every 3 or 4 months or something like that. So the family, doesn't have that time to plan to go to Disneyland or, up to the mountains to camp out. Or so but there also has to be fun involved. And at the bottom there, I have it's kind of covered. Can you read that?
Social covenant.
Yeah, social covenant. It's kind of covered. And a social covenant, it's kind of like our vows, when we got married. um, my wife and I, we didn't go with the traditional vows. We actually wrote them down and spoke them to each other. And but most people, don't think about those vows, those promises that they made. And so it's important sometimes to reinforce a social covenant. When we're together, how what can we agree? How are we going to treat each other? And and make a promise to one another that we're going to treat each other with dignity. We're going to treat each other with respect. Every time that we're together, we're gonna make this commitment that we're going to work together, because after a while, sometimes our own family members can become enemies. I mean, they really can. and and we don't want to use our wife to help us in anything, or the wife doesn't want to include the husband in doing things. And same thing with our kids. Kids don't want their parents to be included in anything that they do. And so a social covenant is important. So we used this slide before, but building relationships can be scary. Okay, because we have to be transparent, we have to be open, and we have to admit that we need each other. Whether it's in a marriage, or whether it's in a church, or whether it's in a community. Over there at Mikasa restaurant, they got a little sign out there. It says, "No one fights alone in this community." And I'm not sure who put it out there, and it's a good statement, but actually putting that into practice is a whole nother deal. But it's a lot of hard work, and it's repetitious. It requires a partnership. We know these things, and I use these building blocks, okay, to kind of, when we're building relationships, when we're enriching our marriage, we're building something. And we often forget to ask the Lord, or to trust God with number one, our salvation. That has to be first and foremost, our salvation. But then our relationships, we have to trust God and talk to the Lord every day about our relationships, just as much as we talk to Him about money and our career, and trust God and with our children. And sometimes life kind of gets in the way, and days kind of turn into weeks, and with time, a lot of people just forget to talk to the Lord, and to trust God, and of course to trust, how is it supposed to work? And my sister would be considered like the black sheep of the family, so kids, we know, are different. They got different personalities, and even though they're raised in the same home, we're all going to face trouble. And once kids grow up, then they have kids, and we're living in a world where lots of grandparents are having to raise grandkids. And so the family, it seems like, is falling apart. And but God is still able to help us. And so wherever we're at, there's always room for improvement. I need to improve, and I want to make sure that the rest of our marriage is enriched and just as good as it was, the first week of marriage. So God wants us to remember that when we pass through the waters, it's like adding water to the cake mix. When you go through the rivers, the mixing up. When you go through the fire and you're baked in the oven, you're not going to get wet. You're not going to be washed away. You're not going to be burned because I will be with you. And many times it's easy to, go about our lives and we incorporate and include God when we come to church. But, the rest of the time, people walk through their life and they forget about the Bible. They forget about applying the principles. And most kids graduating high school have never been taught, to put these principles into their life. And so the only thing that they have is the world's principles, which is going to get them where?
Yeah.
So it's, it might work out. It might go through the process of, looking like a cake, but it's not edible. I mean, it's not going to be to God's best, and God really wants the best for us. And it can't be utopia all the time. There's the fire, there's the mixing, there's the, but we have to understand that's, couples going into marriage and even marriages that have been together for a long time, they just say, I'm not going to do this anymore. There's a lot of people out there, even pastors, who they call it a midlife crisis. They blame it on something, and then they decide that they don't want their wife no more, so they're going to go get another one. This is something we actually encountered a lot in Kenya, and pastors, doing this. And so the thing is these are simple truths, but we have to remember that we have the fruit of the Spirit. We've got love in us. We just need to get it out. We have to remember that God is with us walking through that. And when we have moments of hard times and intense fellowship and anger and arguments and those types of things, we've got to remember that God is standing right there. He is with us, and he wants to help us. But because we can't see God, sometimes, Cheryl's here and I'm here and Jesus is in the middle and we're talking to each other, down to one and down to the other, and we forget that Jesus is right there in the middle of us. And he would like to have something to say, and so, when we go through these hard times, we've got to remember that he is there, he's with us, and he would like to have something to say. Sometimes we don't know. We use these verses of scripture, to try to encourage people, but this is something we've got to use in our marriages and in our relationships. Isaiah 41:10. Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. Sometimes our spouse is not going to treat us the way that we need to be treated. They're not going to encourage you. They're not going to strengthen you, but God will, and so sometimes the devil convinces us to just go, well, I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to isolate myself or be alone. But God wants to encourage us. He knows that your spouse is not going to do everything right. Thank God, and that at times I let Cheryl down, and at times she lets me down, and at times I say things I shouldn't say, and she says things that she doesn't say. We all do that. But we have to remember that we've got to run to God. When we sin and do something wrong, what should we do? We should just run to the Lord. Why? What's waiting for you?
Help.
That's right. Forgiveness, help, encouragement. And listen, it says, I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. We end up hurting one another with the things that we say or just our attitudes sometime. And we've got to go back to God. We've got to remember that He is with us. He is not. He's our God, and so strength is knowing who to engage. That's where strength comes from. We need to. Sometimes we want to justify ourselves, and we end up saying more than we should instead of stopping and just going back to God. So in Proverbs chapter 8, when we're talking about building relationships, it says that wisdom is the architect of relationships. I was the architect at his side. This is wisdom speaking. I was his constant delight, rejoicing always in his presence. Verse 31, rejoicing in the habitable part of his earth, and my delights were with the sons of men. So wisdom loves to dwell in God's presence, but he also loves to dwell with men. And so in the New Living Translation, it says, I was the architect. And so the architect of all relationships is wisdom. And so without wisdom, our relationships crumble. They can fall apart and they can be destroyed. And so that's why we have to include God in it. And I know we don't all know this, but it's easy to stop doing it. It's easy to forget. It's easy not to intentionally take, the shaker of God's kind of love and uncover it and sprinkle it into our relationships. It's easy to just kind of continue in the path that we're going in, and it's not easy to forgive. It's not easy to get over the problems that we have. That's why it's hard work, and it's not easy, but we always have to remember that when we put that ring on, nobody forced me to marry her. In fact, I said I wanted to do it, right? And so I have to always remember my covenant to her and to God and my responsibility. So God knows you, and he knows what you need. Peter said that a husband's responsibility is to deal with his wife according to knowledge. In other words, it's a husband's responsibility to get to know his wife for the rest of his life. And but there's things about each other that not ever truly unless we really get to know that person. So in Psalms 139 verse 16, it says, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. So these verses are very familiar verses, but we need to, the reason I'm pointing this out is we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus, and God ordained us in the Spirit, before we actually became a human being. And so our responsibility, in order to truly apply God's kind of love, is we need to know what is in God's book about my wife. And we need to know what is in God's book about your spouse. What did God write about your spouse? See, God knows you and what you need. But the closer we get to God, the more we understand and know what did he write about us? What was it that he ordained us to do? And the person that we're with, that's who God ordained us to do it with. It's together, and it can go even with your children. And your children, God ordained them to do something maybe completely different than what he ordained you to do, although their upbringing was important so that they could do what God created them to do. Same thing with our other relationships in the churches or with our friends and with different family, is we got to understand that, God, we know that we each have a fingerprint that's different than one another, but we were all created to do things a little differently, but for the most part, God needs us all to do it together. and to work together, even though we're doing different things. And so when it comes to our marriages, we got to realize that yes, two become one flesh, and they're no longer two, but they literally are one unit. But there are still things on the inside of the wife and on the inside of the husband that God wrote down that we have to discover and uncover. And as we grow together, I believe that certain things that God wrote about us are revealed. And it's not just, well, I graduated high school, now I know what I'm going to do. But I think it's a constant revealing as we come to know God better. God constantly is revealing things to us about, okay, now you've got to this point. You raised your children. Okay, now this, finish your career. Okay, now, and each phase of our life. And so we have to remember that God's with us, but also He's in control of our life if we allow Him. And the more we get close to Him, then the more He can reveal to us about each other. And, there is still a lot ahead for each one of us. God hasn't finished. It's not even anywhere close. And so, the Lord wants me to look into my wife, not on the outside, but on the inside. What's written in the book that he had for her, and how can I help her fulfill that destiny? And if we look at each other that way, then we're gonna fulfill God's will for our life and do it together and realize that I need her, she needs me. And so, like this picture of building this bridge, I like it because it's the people, they're leaning into one another, and they have to, work together and set it into place, but they're doing it by leaning in to one another, relying on each other. And so even Jesus needed help. And the picture of salvation is, of course, marriage, right? We're the bride of Christ. And so Jesus needed his disciples to help him feed the people, feed the multitudes. There was about 5,000 men and who knows how many women and children. So it was a lot of work. And Jesus he leaned and relied on his disciples to help him. And even though some of them, like Thomas, was probably what? What was Thomas doing? Doubting. What was Peter doing? Every time Peter opened up his mouth, it was to switch feet, right? Insert open mouth, insert foot, So all of the disciples were still disciples, okay? They were still kind of in the flesh. They weren't thinking spiritually. They had problems, okay? But yet he used them to help him. And so even us, we got a lot of blemishes, a lot of problems, but yet we have to work together, and we got to overlook all of that. So, but we also need everyone to do their part in whatever relationship that we're in, and in our families and in our marriages, even kids, and so this is, something that we know and we understand. But how can we get this concept into the world? How can we get young people that are just raising families to understand that this is what's needed within the family? It's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing for, the parents to have this much responsibility to teach their children these things. And, I didn't, my mom and dad didn't, but now I have studied and I've come to the knowledge that I know that this is what needs to be done in order to make it easier, more simple. Instead of going through all of the hard knocks of life that I've gone through, it was a really bad school to have to go through. And I know many of us have, but, doing our part in teaching others to do theirs, I think even within the church. So what is God's design? You know, if he wrote down in the book something for each one of us, what is it? And as we walk out this life, you know, the picture is this guy's, you know, he's walking and it's kind of up above the city. He's walking above the buildings in a sense. But he thinks that he's just going from point A to point B, but yet there's a hand there drawing out the bridge. You know, who is that? So that's God. You know, we're walking through this life, and we each have a direction that we're going, but you know, God is writing out that path that we're walking on. And so you know, we're building and designing as we go, depending on where we go. And so the design of God's bridge that you're on, it may be a different design than the one that I'm on. But we have to remember, it's not solo, it's not alone. We need help. We need to remember God, and you know, God's design of his bridge is gonna carry the weight of who you're supposed to be with, you know. And sometimes people want to try to build their own bridge and put more weight on it than what it can handle, and it's going to crumble and fall. So just like these are trusses in a building, you know, this church was built with a special kind of a truss. It's not like this one that you see here. Most buildings, they have a ceiling, right? You've seen the ceiling. And that ceiling is made up of a truss that actually supports the roof, and it has an attic. Well, this one doesn't have an attic, and so the trusses that they made are a little bit different. And so this building was designed for a specific purpose, just like our marriages were designed for a specific purpose. And each marriage, it may not have a roof support like this one. It may be like a normal house, but whatever it's designed to do, you know, this building was designed to have an open floor plan. And so if you looked to see what was in the trusses, those trusses had to be built just right in order to support the span and the weight of this building. So boards, there's no board that is made like that. It has to be constructed. You know, we know this is simple stuff, but they have to be joined together. They have to be screwed together, and it has to be designed and put together in a certain way in order to lengthen and for more weight and more strength, be able to support the weight of that. And you know, in Genesis, in the very beginning, when it says that, you know, God created the heavens and the earth, just within the first few verses, it talks about a house, and the Hebrew letters in there represent the house of God. And so everything is about family, even from the very beginning. There's no sense for God to create an earth if there's not going to be a family to put in it. And so the reason that I'm talking about all of this is that this has to be applied to our marriage. So how can we actually apply that concept to our marriage? And what I mean by that in our relationships is joining boards together. So that's what this is about right here, this display thing up here, okay? It's about, it's an example of, so we're going to do a little presentation here. But in each one of these scenarios, one board by itself can't do the job. It takes another board to be joined together, and sometimes three, in order for that board or for that to be designed for a purpose. And so if we look at our marriages that way, look at marriage as a cake, look at marriage as construction or a bridge working together, but pieces have to be added to it, mixed together, baked, or we're going to do a little presentation here. Some of these boards are joined, they're cut, they're joined together, they're nailed or screwed, and then there's weight that's applied to them, and that's what it is, like a picture of our marriage. So it doesn't feel good to be cut. It doesn't feel good for somebody to put a screw into you, or to be nailed or joined together with, and the design is also crucial, because sometimes we just look at marriage and we say, okay, it's just like a housing division. It's cookie cutter. It's all made the same way. That's what it's supposed to look like, but it's not. And so through this little presentation here, it's we're gonna do an example of that. And because we don't have a whole bunch of participation, let's just all kind of gather around, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So does anybody have any questions or comments? This is a short one on this session too, and I wanted to make sure that, let's see here. Let me switch that to this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that right there. Okay, so the first thing, just because of time's sake, what I'm going to do, what I was going to do is, in the audience, I was going to switch these up. Okay, I'm not going to. Okay, I'm not going to. But what I was going to do is, I was going to give you some instructions. Okay.
Not all the instructions.
No. Well, what this was is you were going to get a piece of paper, okay? Like for instance, this goes here and this goes here. So if I gave you that, it's going to show you that there was how many pieces?
It looks like 3.
3 pieces, and it gives you the measurements, right? Okay. So what you were supposed to do as a team, come together, and these weren't going to be here, but you were supposed to figure out which was yours, which set of boards was yours, okay? And then you were, was that?
They're not on the right spot. They are now.
Well, they are now, but.
So these are what you're talking, so this is the 12 1/4.
But how would you know that?
Well, I can tell by looking at if they're side by side, they.
Let me ask you, how could you tell the difference?
Oh, well, see, no.
So that's what I'm saying. So the whole goal to this was, how do you know which is yours?
Would you have to do this?
Okay. So what I was going to do is I was going to incorporate all of this teaching into, so like for instance, if that piece of paper was your marriage that God designed, then you were going to have to work together to find out, okay, which mold is it? Which format is it? And it's a specific design. Okay, so like for instance, if you have that one, then you would take this. So what are your measurements?
For that, I'd say 9 3/8.
Okay, so that's 9 3/8.
Okay.
That's right. And the next one is what?
The next one would be 12 1/4.
Okay, so that's this one here,
Yeah.
12 1/4.
And then
And 11
and
and an 8.
1/8.
Okay. So that one would be yours. Okay, now that's wonderful. We've got there, but we also have some ingredients.
Oh, okay.
So what is this right here? What would this be considered in what you've all learned?
Well, that'd be the base. And that would be the building, the
tools.
Okay, so without, okay, if
checking it.
you had that,
Uh-huh.
okay, that's like, kind of like the Bible in the sense.
Uh-huh.
Direction.
But without this, then you would choose,
All willing.
which one would you choose?
Right.
So what is this? What is this considered in the kingdom?
The book.
Right?
Yes.
So this is like the truth, right?
Uh-huh.
You see? So that's just kind of an example. Okay, now, so, so now you're supposed to figure out, how is this supposed to come together, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you're building a house and a truss, then how would this go together? So Mark, I'll let you kind of help her just a little bit.
No.
We're not
Well-
builders, we don't
Well,
do.
okay, so based upon the information that you see, can you start to get a shape of what it might supposed to look like? Sherry, can you see? What would be the shape that this thing is supposed to look like? Because just like you said, when you come together, you don't know what marriage is gonna look like, right? Okay, so based upon this right here, what should the shape look like?
Are these trusses?
Yeah, so it's like building a house, right?
No. Let's see, we could not go like that, maybe. Oh,
Okay, at least you're trying, right? So, okay,
does this go like this?
well, it could. Now, and how are you gonna glue it together?
You screw it in with those power tools.
Okay, there you go. All right, so at least you're trying, okay?
Is that a
I like
pallet?
this. That's a hole right there.
So
We
there-
just did it back.
Well, that's just a palette, so it had
Oh,
3D.
okay, okay.
So that's kind of a picture of us, you know, we've got a few holes in our life, you know,
Uh-huh.
it's used, it's all, okay, so here's, if you remember the photo of the,
Right, the truss, you got it.
so if you're gonna make a house, okay?
Oh, see, I was way off.
Now, that's okay, but here's what I want you to figure out, look, so this is gonna be the support, okay, that's gonna cause this thing. Now, so like for instance, you know, can you make a roof and a covering to protect your family out of one board? But can you do it with two?
You can make a base.
Okay, but is it gonna stay together?
No,
Okay, so, you know, what I was gonna do is I was gonna have everybody stand around and let everybody try to figure out until they finally said, uncle. And they said, what do we need?
Direction.
Help. Help. Okay, so over here, we got some power tools, right? Okay, but we have ingredients, okay, that we gotta figure out. Okay, so if I just put a screw in this right here, it's gonna split this out.
right.
So I'm gonna have to have a drill bit, right? So I got one ingredient to, unless I have a tool specifically for that. And of course, we know that the example is that the Bible is our tool, right? So what we want, this is gonna have to be strong, and it's gonna have to last. It's gonna have to bear a lot of weight, okay? And so, the first thing that I think that I wanna do is I wanna secure these together first and make sure that they are strong. Because if you put these things
Right.
without anything, it's just gonna fall, right? So what I wanna do is I need a clamp. Hold this thing together. And normally I would have a framing square. You know what a framing square is?
Sort of.
What it does is it makes sure that it's aligned up right. So, I want to make sure that these things kind of fit together correctly. So what I want to do is I want to drill a hole, so that way, 2 holes. Actually, this is supposed to be there, that's why I brought that in here. Okay, so now I'm gonna put some screws in there, right? Is that the right size screw that we need?
I think it's
Too
fine.
short. Too short?
Okay, so what about that one? Okay. What about this one? Test it and see if it would be about the right size. So how would you test it to make sure? So what you do is you lay it up here and you look at the length. See that?
Mhm,
See,
so it would be.
so that would be about the right length, see?
Okay.
So this is another practical example, and not only that, but I also need a drill, a bit, okay? So will that work? Will this work?
Oh, put it on there and see.
Remember what we used to do in school? We used to Put the round hole in the square peg. Okay, so that's the right size, and that's the right bit. So what we want to do is okay, we'll do one more screw.
He's good at this.
Well, yeah.
Um,
We just say, call somebody,
okay.
get that fixed.
So now that we have that, so, making sure that we have the right tools, the right materials, and the right ingredients,
Support.
and the right support. So now, what size of screw should I use on this?
That should be a shorter, smaller, there we go, maybe.
Okay.
Is that-
Think that might work?
Yeah.
So
Well,
here's another screw. It's a little bit longer. Think we need that big of a screw? Probably that one. Yeah, so that'll be plenty strong. This one, look at how long that is.
yeah.
Probably overkill, right?
Okay.
So that's another thing is that it's kind of like doctrine, If you
Uh-oh,
see there,
What happened?
it split.
look,
Oh,
okay.
I thought you knew.
Oh, when you use the wrong amount of force, what happens?
You tear it up.
Ah,
Broken.
So, and then we have to be able to adapt and be resourceful. So what that does is it countersinks
We
it.
can fix the broken pieces.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to do one more here, and it's a little different. So what I'm going to do is put this here.
Did you ever think you'd do this in church?
Okay. So we're going to drill another hole. So remember, you're these boards. You like having screws in you?
No.
No, does it screw in? But once it's finished, then what happens?
You have, yes, you have.
Now, do you think that that's strong? How strong do you think it is? Do you think I could stand on it? I weigh 220 pounds.
Oh, well, then you're good. I was supposed to buy it.
So, God can put the weight of the world on your shoulders. See? So, what this, is supposed to be a practical example of people in relationships that, first of all, you got to figure out how does it go together. So that's why we need to make sure that we have the right ingredients, Okay, so this one here is similar, but just for practical application purposes, this one has a different joint here. You see that? But it still has the same concept. So just like we talked about a cake and a recipe, you bake a cake the same way, okay? But this one here, if you notice, this one looks like this, and this one looks similar, but it's got a longer
Right.
edge. And so this is still a marriage. It looks a little bit different, but it's still, the joint is a little different because God has a specific weight that he's going to put on. Okay, so now this one here, Sherry, I'll let you participate in this one here. And of course, you know what the measurements are. So this one here, and it's 3 pieces. So what do you think the shape of it might look like?
We're still in the truss.
Well, but this one is a little different. Okay, so what shapes do you have? What board do you have that it's in a shape?
One board?
Yeah. How many pieces? How many boards? Okay.
3.
So what shape is that?
Well, it's like a triangle.
A what?
Triangle. I missed it, didn't I?
Well, let's see.
Stumped you.
Okay, that's a triangle. So what is this shape?
That's that's a T.
Okay, so what do you think these boards are supposed to look?
Well, I like this.
Whoa, look at
All
that.
right.
Look at that.
There you go.
See? Now, perfect. Okay, then where does that go? Where would that go? To make it, to glue it together, to make it strong. Aha.
It's like a cross, Jerry.
Okay, but see what this is actually, it's a part of the truss that this would, see, it's,
Okay.
okay, so basically on this one here, it's similar, but we would want to screw this together here, okay? So just like we did, we screwed that, we'll screw this here, and then we will drill holes here, and so this is almost, in a sense, kind of like a bridge panel. See?
Okay.
So, but it's still a picture of a marriage, okay? And then I'll let you two ladies figure that out. Go ahead, you can figure that out.
All right.
Yeah.
What is it?
So what are you building here? What's the goal? We're building what? A house, right?
There's the walls.
Or is that,
So you don't want me to build your.
Okay, so here's the message behind this, is that we're looking at the obvious, right?
okay,
But what the Lord wants us to
Oh.
do is to put that together and screw it together. Now, this one only has two pieces, okay? But it has a specific purpose.
With the cornerstone?
Well, like for instance, it's not gonna require to be holding up a whole bunch of weight, okay? Like these, okay? It doesn't mean that one marriage is weaker than the other. It's the point is that these are just simple examples of biblical truth concerning marriage that we've got to figure out. Okay, what's the pieces that God's given us in our marriage, and how do we put it together, and so that it's and it has to be done correctly. I mean, you could take this and put it in here if you wanted to. It still look nice. See how nice that looks? Wow, look how pretty that is.
well,
Okay, but how are you gonna screw it together? Okay? You see what I'm saying?
mhm.
So you're not gonna be able to screw that together. So if you put it out here, then now you can screw it together like this. And even if you make a mistake and split it, there's still hope. So the point is that there's gonna be some mistakes, there's gonna be some flaws, and you know what the nice thing is? Let's say that we put it together incorrectly. Guess what?
Yeah.
We can take it apart, and we can fix it. See, and so this was just kind of a practical example of what we're learning, and this can be done if you're an artist. You could have people up here and get couples before a painting, and you put a bunch of colors on it, and you say, okay, what's the picture that God wants you to paint with your life? But the thing is that we need each other, but we also need help. You know, like for instance, since I'm the one that came up with this, well, I'm the only one that knows how it goes together, right?
Mhm.
And each one is different. And that's how it is with God. God's the only one that knows exactly how the blueprint is for your marriage. And everyone, it looks similar, but it's not. And we each have a function, we each have a purpose, and so we have to go and ask the Lord, how does this go together? And how do I do that? So
We have to work together.
So this is another one. It's similar to this, but I was going to do that one first, but I'm not going to. This one was supposed to be like this. This goes here. And when I was in Kenya, I built a church. It was at least this wide and 90 feet long. And I built the trusses on the ground, and the Lord showed me how to build them for strength. And I mean, they were heavy, heavy, heavy. So I got an education on that. And so I hope this was kind of helpful. A practical example and explanation. We've got ingredients, we got pieces and parts. And what's this for? What's it say? If at first you don't succeed, do what?
Knock him in the head.
Get a bigger hammer, right? Get a bigger hammer. Okay. The other thing that I had was, I have this here. And this is a board, and it has a whole bunch of cuts in it. You see that? Okay. So what would be the purpose for a board like this? Why would you do that to a board? So if you need the board to bend around the corner, then you cut it, and of course it's cracking a little bit, but it actually now bends, and you can make a shape and a form. So that's another thing that God might do with us, is cut us to shape us to be able to bend, and that's not something that you couldn't normally do with a piece of wood. Right. And so when this was green, they cut it. It's dried out now, but that's why it's cracking. But when it's green, you can actually almost bend this into like an archway shape. So that's the props that I had to give an example of marriage. And every marriage is different, and you have to follow the instructions. You got to measure it. You got to know which one's yours. So any questions? Comments?
Good illustration.
Oh, well, good. Well, good. So, do you know how to operate one of these?
Yeah.
You do?
Well,
I don't.
I do.
A little bit, yeah.
I have my own at home, but usually I talk one of the boys into coming in
Wow.
and being like,
Cool.
"Did you take my drill home?" Yes, I did. Bring it back, we gotta drill some holes, and then I make them do it.
Good.
Wow, I'm impressed.
So any questions? Comments?
No, it's just awesome. That's it. Yeah. You want me to show you how to
Yes.
take a screw? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead and push the button. There you go. Wow.
that's backwards.
Yeah, so go ahead and take the screw out. Wow.
Good job.
She did it.
Wow, she's handy.
Very good.
Oh.
Right, one more. And the other thing that I was gonna do too is, I did have a few screws,
Loose?
no, that had a different head.
Okay.
See, they have a different
Oh,
head.
yeah, you
So
gotta have a different.
you gotta,
bit.
so even though it's a screw, so that was just another kind of a practical example. Thank you. And, this one might be a little harder, but you think you can do that?
I can work it
All right, yeah, you
Did I
gotta
do that?
push a little harder.
Well,
There you go. Okay.
Fooling around.
Now,
oh wait,
Go ahead.
is it in the hole?
okay. So go ahead.
Did your power change?
Oh, here, let me
You
do
might
this.
use some
Okay, go
for VBS ones.
All right, thank you.
Robin gets the
Well,
award.
shoot.
That's okay. You did good. So, very good, thank you. You're wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, ready for some pizza?
Yep.
All right.
That's hard
Thank you.
work, wasn't it? And I'll be presenting after lunch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Should be some.
I'm gonna do, no, I'm gonna do.